If you clicked on this video, you're probably interested in learning how to improve the quality of the photos that you take for your PC flips. Or maybe you just want to take a nice picture of your PC. I don't know why you're here, but whichever reason you are here for, I've got you covered. Because over the last couple of months, I've learned a lot of things through experience which have really improved the quality of my photos. And with this video, my goal is to pass that knowledge along to you. For reference and to build some credibility, I'll put some pictures up on screen here of what my early photos looked like whenever I first started PC flipping. And then for comparison, here's some photos I took of my more recent flips after I implemented some of the tips that I'm going to be going over in this video. I'd say that the first ones weren't bad by any means, but that the newer ones just look a lot better and much more professional in my opinion. So if you want to hopefully achieve the same kind of transformation in your photos that I have, and if any of this sounds interesting to you, then I'd recommend watching this video because I'm going to go over the process that I now personally follow when taking pictures of my PC flips. So without further ado, here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the basics, and this is the stuff that everybody talks about in all these videos, the stuff you've probably heard 4 or 5 times already if you've watched other videos on the same topic. But if you haven't watched those videos, then this is going to be important to watch, because the way it is that if you don't have the basics, none of this other stuff is really going to matter. There's a good chance that you probably know a lot of these things already, so I'm not going to go into really any detail, and let's just get them out of the way real quick. So step 1 is to have the entire PC in the frame. Make sure the whole PC is in the photo, don't cut off the edges, you're good. Step 2, just take the glass side panel off. It looks way better whenever you have the glass off. You don't see all the reflections of whatever's going on in your living room. You don't want any of that, you don't want the reflections, you don't want any of that. So just take the glass side panel off, put it somewhere else, and your pictures will come out looking way better. Step 3 is to make your area look decent. I'll go over this a little bit more later on, but get a good background, set up some good lights. Natural light works really well. If you have lamps, that works too. Just find something that works. Certain times of day are better than others for shooting pictures, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have the optimal time of day. Just pretty much make sure the pictures don't look dark and make sure the background looks nice. And then step 4 is to start your pictures out with a hero shot. Now, what this basically means is to take your picture from an angle similar to this. I'll put a picture up on the screen. Just take it from this general diagonal angle and either have it looking slightly up or even, depending on what looks best for the build in question. And then finally, actually just put time and effort into this. If you don't put any effort into it, it's going to reflect and you're not going to get the results you want. You can't just expect to pull your phone out, take the worst picture on planet Earth, and then have your listing do well. It just doesn't work that way. So as long as you're putting effort in, these steps should all actually get you reasonably far. There's a good chance you've probably heard other people say to take your pictures in portrait mode. I have to disagree with that. There's a reason why. Portrait mode works, but I actually prefer to do it a different way, which is editing the photos afterwards and then basically manually applying that the way I like. So I'll go over that later on. If you want to do it the way that I do it, don't do portrait mode for now. And then once you do that, you're pretty much like 60% of the way there. You've probably got pretty good photos already, like my first ones were, but you can probably tell that there's definitely still more work to be done. If you want to get your pictures looking really nice instead of just pretty good, then there's a lot of specific information that I've learned recently that you can do with just your phone to make your pictures look quite a bit better. So now we've got the basics out of the way, it's time to move on to the more specific stuff, and this is going to be pretty packed with information, so hope you enjoy. Alright, so first of all, if you want the rest of this tutorial to be as effective as possible, I'm going to recommend that you get a tripod for either your camera or your phone, whichever one you're using, and again, phone is perfectly fine. That's what I use. You don't have to get a tripod if you don't want to, but I would definitely recommend it because it's just gonna make everything so much easier. You can get them for like 20 bucks on Amazon. If you are going to buy one, I would recommend that you get one with a ring light, phone stand, and a Bluetooth remote for your phone so that you can take the pictures without actually touching your phone and then messing up the angle. I'll link the one that I use in the description. I have zero affiliation with this brand. I just bought it a couple months ago. And the one thing I will say about it is that it's kind of wobbly. And I'm sure all the ones on Amazon are just some random guy drop shipping them from AliExpress. So if you really want to just go to the source and buy them on AliExpress and wait a little bit longer for them to ship, then I'm sure that'll work too. All right, so once you got your tripod, the next step is to set up your background. Now, this is the background that I use. I use it for both my videos and for taking my pictures, because I think it's probably the nicest looking place in my house. Ideally, you're gonna want something that's relatively clean. You don't wanna have 1,000 different things in the background that all the people looking at the listing are gonna get distracted by. You just want it to be real clean and simple. That's why mine is on a wall. If you want to copy me, honestly, just find a wall with a painting, get a table or something to put the computer on, and then maybe put like a fake plant, and that's really all you need. You don't want it to look too cluttered, you just want to keep it simple. You want the computer to be the focus of the picture, not your house. And this next tip, I actually only found out about this recently, but it has made a massive difference to my photos. So I'll put some B-roll up to actually show you what I'm talking about here. If you have one of the newer iPhones, like I do, with the telephoto camera, and I'm sure there's a lot of Androids that have those as well, so just do a little bit of research there. Anyway, if you have a phone with a telephoto camera, then experiment with actually using that instead of your main camera. Now, I don't know how much experience you personally have with taking pictures of computers, but if you've ever done it with 1x zoom, and for example, let's say you had the computer right here and then your phone was just a little bit farther back, and then you take the picture of that, the experience that I've had with that is that the picture just doesn't look good. And I don't know what it is, it just looks weird. It looks like the proportions are wrong or something. This fixes that. I am not an expert on cameras, I don't know how this stuff works, but telephoto, 3x zoom, that fixes it. And the reason I say to only do this if you have a telephoto lens is because if you do 3x zoom with your regular camera and you don't have optical zoom, it's just gonna look like crap, so don't do that. In order for this to work, you're obviously gonna have to position your tripod and your phone farther back, which may or may not be a possibility depending on how tight your space is. So it could be kind of difficult, but if you can do this, I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, I always used to take my photos in 1x zoom and they always just felt off, and this is what fixed it for me. Alright, so remember how I said before that my photos always used to just kind of feel off and like something wasn't working right? And I mentioned that the telephoto lens fixed that. Well, there was another thing that I also found that I feel like kind of contributed to that offness. I don't know what to call it. Basically, it was something wrong with my focus point. So if you look at this photo right here, I'll put it somewhere. If you look specifically at the RGB on this photo, you'll probably notice that it just doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it does in real life, at least. All the light kind of goes to like the middle of the fan, and it's just not distributed properly. I didn't know why this happened for the longest time, and I just kind of thought it was how it worked if I was going to use my phone. And there's probably a better method to fix it, but I did find one way to fix it, and that is if you put a single source of a really bright light in your scene. So for example, mine is, I have that lamp, which I'll show this as well. I have that lamp which is on the right side of my set, and then right just slightly below the lampshade there's a little bit of light that sticks out that's super bright. If you tap your focus point on your phone to something like that, like a really bright light, it just completely alleviates this. I don't know why, I don't know the technical reason for why this happens, but it does work. And so if you're having that problem and you have a bright light in your scene, tap that, it'll probably fix it, and that's what worked for me. Now, once you've got your camera at the right spot and you focused it at the right point as well, there's a couple settings that you should probably change. Now, you can certainly do this if you have an actual camera, and I'm pretty sure pretty much every modern phone you can do this as well. Even after you've changed the focus point, sometimes the RGB just looks overblown or it just doesn't look natural at all, and the way that you fix that is basically to go into your settings and turn the exposure down. It all varies depending on your circumstances, but I usually end up somewhere between -1.3 and -1.7. For the aspect ratio, honestly, I've always just used the default 4:3 aspect ratio that my phone takes pictures in. I do it horizontal, but I never ever put any thought into like if square or 4:3 or 16:9 or what's the best aspect ratio. In my opinion, it probably doesn't matter. If you take it in 4:3, it usually fits quite nicely because it's right around the proportions of a computer. I would say just go with whatever works best for the platforms you're on and whatever works best for you. But there's not really anything else that you need to actually go into your camera settings and change before you take the pictures, unless you have a Pro iPhone. If you have a Pro iPhone from one of the recent generations that supports RAW images, which the format for that is .dng. So if you have a good phone, I don't know the Android equivalent of this, but if you have an iPhone and you have a Pro from one of the recent generations that has RAW, definitely shoot your photos in that, because otherwise it's gonna do post-processing on the photos, and I have never liked the way that that turns out on my phone. Yes, it takes up more storage, but once you edit them and then export them as PNGs, you can just delete the RAW files and then it's fine. So now that you finally got the camera ready, it is time for us to actually go ahead and take some pictures. I moved over to the side here because I'm planning on putting a lot of example pictures up. So if you remember the hero shot position that I talked about earlier, and you probably also, if you watched other guides on taking pictures, you probably know what that is. I like to take between 3 and 6 pictures in the hero shot position, as shown here somewhere. Each one will be the exact same angle, but just with a different color of RGB. You don't have to do it this way, but if you do, then here's what I recommend. Keep the tripod and the phone in the same spot for all the pictures. Do not touch that at all. Use the Bluetooth remote to take all your pictures. Don't touch the phone, unless you need to adjust the focus point, which we've already talked about. This is way more convenient to do if your RGB controller is hooked up to the reset switch, because you can just press a button and then it changes the color. Like I said, my tripod specifically is always super wobbly, so I like to step pretty far away and then take the picture remotely so that there's no variation in the angle at all. I would recommend doing that as well if your tripod is also wobbly. But if it shifts like 2 pixels, it doesn't really matter as long as it's not making a noticeable major variation from picture to picture in like the angle. Then for picture like 5 or 6, I like to usually rotate the PC and then show an angle of something like this, which is basically just the internals of the PC head on. I usually prefer to do this with a little bit more exposure than the rest if I have the wiggle room for it, because it just makes everything light up better and obviously it's easier to see. Then after this, I'll usually take my phone off the tripod and I'll just take a couple really cool shots from different angles. Usually one of looking up at the GPU, if I have an AIO, looking sideways at the cooler, and then something else. It all depends on the build and what parts I'm using. But you really just gotta do this differently each time and find out what works best for your specific build. And then finally for these, also adjust your focus point and exposure and everything as you need. And I also just use the regular 1x lens for these because I don't find that there's any need to use the telephoto lens for these ones. They just look fine how they are. Then finally for picture 9 and 10, I will just take pictures of the IO, one of the front/top IO, depending on how the case works. And for picture 10 specifically, that's where I'll usually put a picture of the rear IO. Now the way I do this is I'll usually put the phone back on the tripod. I'll set the tripod up like right here, if you can see that. And then I'll turn on the ring light because that'll make it easier to see the ports and everything. And just take a nice solid straight angled shot of the back, and that's really all you need. If you're selling the PC with other accessories more than just the Wi-Fi antenna, the power cord, and stuff like that, you could also take a picture of all the other accessories you're going to be bundling it with. Here's an example of how I've done that in the past. And finally, if you're selling an optional setup along with the PC, you can put that as picture 10, and then somewhere in your description you can say like, will bundle with setup shown in picture 10 for X amount of money. And another thing I don't do often, but you can also do, is take a picture with the glass side panel on. And the reason I don't do this is because it never turns out looking good. It just always reflects a bunch of stuff and it just looks bad. I think there's some kind of filter that you can buy that prevents that, but I don't know how any of that works. And I just opt to take the pictures with the side panel off. And then at this point, you can also make a video showing it like booting up and everything and showing that Windows is activated. I normally don't put these in my listings, although I probably should. I just wait till somebody asks for a video of it running, and I think that probably actually reassures them more than a pre-recorded video from like a couple weeks ago. But now, finally at this point, you should be left with about 10 photos and maybe even a video. So the next thing to do is to choose which one of the hero shots you think has the best looking color. This varies from build to build, and you really just look through all of them, and whichever one sticks out to you the most, that's the one to pick. Doesn't matter a whole lot, but just pick one and consider that your cover photo from here on out. I'll explain why that's important in a little bit. If you did everything right, it should look something like this. Now that's pretty good, but it's not quite as appealing or inviting as this, is it? Alright, so what I've just done is I've gone to my computer and I'm going to be basically showing you how to edit these photos so that they look even better, because there's a good chance if you're using your phone that the quality is good, but the colors just like look washed out. At least that's how it is for me. My colors always look just completely washed out, and so I always edit my photos. Now I edit them in Photoshop, which is kind of expensive. So if you don't have Photoshop, then I understand. And for this tutorial, I'll be using something called Photopea, which is basically online Photoshop. For the purposes of this video, Photopea is going to be all we need. First thing you're going to want to do here, this only applies if you're using RAW, by the way, is because Photopea works differently than Photoshop, if you're using it, you're going to have to go into the image, open it up like this, and then it's somewhere up here. I don't know why. It's like save as. You save the raw image. It took me a little bit to figure this out, but you save the raw image as a PNG instead. And then you go right back into Photopea, open from computer. You can open that PNG and it will look correct. First, you're gonna want to import all your pictures over on the right here. I'm not doing this for the sake of time. And then you're gonna wanna create some, I don't actually know how to do it, new adjustment layer, brightness, contrast, just leave the settings how they are for now. Create a new one, again, vibrance, and then a third one for color balance. And usually those are the only 3 things I change. You can change them based on your cover photo, and then if you have all the other photos down below, it'll kind of fill in pretty decently as long as you didn't change too much in between each photo. It should fill in relatively well for all of them, but you can go back through and you can make minor adjustments. Never push anything the whole way, either direction. This goes for everything. Don't ever push anything the whole way. It just always looks bad. I'm probably gonna brighten this up a little bit here till about where it looks good. And then vibrance, this is the one I really usually have to mess with because my colors always look super washed out. So saturation, I'll turn that up pretty high, and then vibrance pretty high. Not the whole way because it looks bad. Not the whole way down, it looks bad. Something like right about there. And then color balance, I'll always do yellow, blue, a little bit more to the yellow because I feel like my camera makes things a little bit too cool. Don't really ever want to go more than -10 or +10. That looks decent. If I make it to like the size of what it would normally look like, something like that, it looks pretty good, but I think it could probably use a bit more vibrance. So we'll go in here, change that just a little bit higher. This one I noticed came out particularly dull, like I'm using more vibrance than I usually would. And then you would go through, you'd hide your layers down through, you'd hide all your different layers. If they all look good, you're good. If they don't, you can go in here individually and do image adjustments, and then you can pick the 3 and you can adjust specifically that one layer. So if you have, say the red one looks good but the green one doesn't, you can change the green one by going to image adjustments, and then you can individually modify that. So that works for basically all these ones, and usually this one fills in as well if it doesn't change it. But then these ones, honestly, these 3 always tend to come out really nicely on my camera just without editing, and I usually don't need to do much editing to get these to look good. If anything, sometimes I'll even just put them in above the adjustment layers here so that they don't even get the adjustments, and then I'll make like minor tweaks to the angle or something like that. I normally don't have to do much editing on these ones to make them look nice. And then these ones, these aren't really there for show. These are just there purely so that people can see functionality. The 9th one I almost never do any edits to, and then the 10th one I will sometimes brighten it up a little bit. So for example, you'd probably want to brighten this one up because it just looks kind of eh. Once you get all of your colors accurate, now this will take way longer than what I've shown so far. This will take you up to like 30 minutes to get all your colors looking really nice for each individual one. Now again, you'd have different layers here that you could show and hide, but I'm not doing that just for the sake of time. Then what you're gonna wanna do is on your cover photo specifically, this probably isn't even tuned to what I would like it to be, but you're gonna wanna go up here, go to this, right click on it, then click polygonal lasso select, okay? What we're gonna do is basically outline this computer and then make the background blurred, and that'll achieve the same thing as portrait mode would, but in editing. So if I go to this tool, zoom in a little bit, come down here, it does not have to be perfect. I'm obviously going a little bit fast. You should definitely take more time than I am, but I only have about 4 more minutes to record before I have to go somewhere, so we're gonna go pretty fast, and I'll speed this up for you here. Alright, so I'm just finishing up now. Again, like I said, we're only doing this for the cover photo, so you don't need to worry about doing this too many times. I just finished up. Hopefully you get a better outline than me. Please take more time than that. But now that you have the outline here, you can see it's highlighted and stuff. Make sure you're selecting the layer that your cover photo is. So for me, it's just the background, but yours might be different. Hold Control, press J, and then you'll see it makes a new layer here. If I go back to regular zoom, and I get rid of the background, you can see it's just the PC now. So we're gonna put the background back, but then make sure you select the background, not the top layer, but the background, then go to Filter and Blur. Now you can pick any of these, but I like Gaussian Blur. It's just like the cleanest in my opinion. And go here, you can see, you could blur like the whole entire thing, but you don't wanna do that. I usually go somewhere between like 6 and 10, somewhere in that range. And if you just get a real nice blur here, I think that looks pretty nice. So my edges don't look good because I spent like 10 seconds on outlining this whenever I should have spent way longer. If you spend longer on it, it'll look better. I can mess with the vibrance a little bit more and whatever, and basically get it to be what I like. And then this right here is not what I would have as a final picture. I would do a little bit more tuning to make it look actually nicer. However, for the sake of time, right now, I'm just gonna pretend it's done, which it's not. You wanna spend a lot more time on this than I did. But you just go up here, File, you can save the PSD to your computer if you wanna come back. Export as PNG, and then whatever the default is usually fine here, and then it'll download it to your computer. If I open this up, there it is. That's basically the finished product. And then you would go through, you'd hide your layers. For example, this would be like picture 2, the orange one, and then I'd export as PNG for that, and then I'd hide that layer below. It would be picture 3, the yellow one. I'd export as PNG, and then you do that until you've exported all of your pictures here. You do that till they're all done. And then that's basically all you got to do. It's really not that complicated to do these simple edits to your photos, but it really just makes them come out way nicer. And I would 100% recommend doing this. Just take the extra 30 minutes, do it. It's 100% worth it. But yeah, I really got to go somewhere right now, so I will catch you at whatever I record next. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. If there's anything that you think I missed or that I could have done better, or if anyone who actually knows what they're doing with photography is watching this video, then I would actually really appreciate it if you would leave a comment. Just tell me what I did right, tell me what I did wrong, and any other tips that you could leave for all of us to learn. I'd love that, so please do so. I'm by no means a professional in photography. I'm just making this video to share some of the things that I've learned that I think help my photos stand out among other listings in my local area. Because if next time you go to take pictures, you actually do take advantage of all the things I've talked about, I think it'll make a big difference. I think I'm also gonna put a link in the description to a kind of text version of all this, maybe a Google Doc, and I'll probably just put all the same information that I just talked about, but in there instead, and it'll basically be the script of this video, I guess. So alongside that, if the information in this video helped you as much as it helped me to transform my pictures or just learn in general, then I would appreciate it if you do the usual YouTube things that everyone asks for. I'm not gonna say it, you know what I'm talking about. I guess if you know any friends that take absolutely atrocious looking pictures like all the other people on Facebook Marketplace, then share this video with them. But jokes aside, I am really grateful that you watched this video and that you made it till the end. And I don't know when the next guide that I make will be up on the channel, but I obviously do plan to make more guides at some point. So if I have another guide that I've made since this one and you're watching this in the future, then I'll put it on the end screen somewhere here, the next guide that I think you should watch, but I don't really have a good segue into that because I haven't recorded any yet, and this is my first one. Otherwise, it'll just be a video from my PC flipping series. But yeah, that's all I've got, so thanks for watching.